Hello, welcome back to Vintage Recipe Hero. This week we are exploring British school dinners. I previously explored 2 school dinner menu items in 2 shorts, which I will link down below. But this week we're doing a long form video and I'm making 2 recipes in 1 video, which is a little bit crazy for me. So we are going to be doing a corned beef hash as well as a Bakewell Tart for dessert, and I will be tasting it at the end of this video to let you know what I think. But hold your horses, because I will also be getting my British family to taste these recipes and give their opinion on whether they are authentically 50s, 60s retro British school dinner approved. So let's get started. Let's start the pastry for the Bakewell Tart. Now, I am filming at my parents' house, that's why I'm not in my normal kitchen right now, and I forgot my gooseneck phone holder. This week is gonna have to be different, I'm so sorry. Anyways, I will make sure to take footage of all these things top down as needed. So what you're gonna need for the Bakewell Tart pastry is 225 grams of flour, 150 grams of really cold cubed butter, which we will add in right away. You're gonna need 25 grams of icing sugar, 1 egg, well beaten, and some cold water, which we'll add in a tablespoon at a time. Additionally, you should have at the ready some flour for flouring the board, a rolling pin, whichever suits you, and they said a 23 centimeter or 9-inch baking tart pan. So we've got our butter into the flour. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna break it into pea-sized pieces with our fingers. If you have a food processor, you're really lucky because you can also give it a quick whiz in the food processor. You want it to be tiny, but be careful with the food processor because 20 seconds later, it'll turn into this mushy pasty thing, which you don't really want as your pastry. You want the butter to be in pea-sized pieces because you want it to melt unevenly. When it melts unevenly in little pockets, the water in the butter evaporates and it makes a flaky crust, and we like flaky crusts. I have had Bakewell Tarts before from British shops around town. However, I find a lot of them from like the import shops. I find them tasting like a little bit old, which is obvious why they taste a little bit old. So I'm excited to try a fresh Bakewell Tart. And also I love having the icing on top of the tart, but I find with the ones I buy in the stores that they seem to be almost 1/3 almond, 1/3 icing, the thinnest bit of raspberry jam, and then the rest of that crust. And I want a little bit less the icing and a little bit more of the jam. I think the jam in the Bakewell Tart is really nice. Okay, that's pretty good. Let me show you what this looks like before I move on to the next step. That's what it should look like. Okay, next the recipe says to add in your icing sugar. Personally, I would have added it in before, but that's fine. And to mix that in. Next, I'm gonna make a little hole in the middle of my flour. I'm gonna add my beaten egg. And I'm gonna add, let's start with 2 tablespoons of cold water. I'm just gonna use my hand to mix this. You can use a spatula, you can use a bread scraper or table scraper. Be gentle though. And I definitely need more water. Let me add 2 more tablespoons. It's still not coming together, so I'm gonna add 2 more tablespoons. Notice I'm not cleaning off my hand between each adding of tablespoons. I'm gonna clean off my hand at the end, but the more I make that motion, the more I'm developing the gluten in the flour, which for pastry is not really a desirable texture. That's why we're being so gentle. Okay, it's coming together now. Just gonna knead it a few times, and then I'm gonna flour that counter and roll it into my tart shell. Now I'm gonna clean these dirty fingers. There's my dough. Let's get some flour. Grab like a big pinch like this, move your wrist. It's all in the wrist. Take this lovely pie dough, which has just come together. I like to kind of pre-form it into a circle. Makes it easier to roll out. This looks like a lot for this little guy. We are going to flour our rolling pin, which doesn't really stick, but it is easier to keep unstuck dough unstuck than to unstick stuck dough. These are words of wisdom from my baking arts teacher. We want it to be quite a bit bigger than the actual circumference of this because it's gonna have to go up the edges as well. You definitely want it to go up the edges because we're gonna have that delicious almond filling and that sweet icing. Okay, let's try this. Brush off some of your flour because that's not very tasty. Okay, I did mine a little bit too big, but that's okay. What I'll do is I'll just fold it in a little bit here and then snip off some of the ends. But when we bake this, it is going to shrink up a little bit. Okay, let me get my scissors. Let's snip this a little bit. All right, cool. So we have a few little scraps and I am not throwing these out. I am going to roll this out. Ugh. Yay. Okay, with my scrap, I am gonna add some of this raspberry jam. Ooh. Close it up. Make it a little bit secure. I never throw out scraps of pastry like this. If you have jam or peanut butter or Nutella at home, you can make a little mini pocket like this. But even when I don't have anything at home, I'll take the scrap of pastry and just put a tablespoon or two of brown sugar and bake that into it. It's really lovely. Okay, we are going to chill this now. And while it's chilling, I'm gonna start the corned beef hash. Now, the first step in this recipe, it says to boil the potatoes. So I've got a little pot of water on back there, salted water, that I'm gonna boil my potatoes in, but it doesn't say whether to peel them or chop them. So perhaps you're boiling the potatoes whole and then mashing them with the skin on them. But I'm actually just going to peel and cube these potatoes. I know it's not always recommended to boil potatoes without their skin, but that's what I'm doing just for convenience sake and as per what I know my family will enjoy, which is mashed potatoes without the skin. I'm a potato person, are you? Or are you a rice person? When I lived in Japan, at first it was a bit hard for me to eat rice every day, but then I got so used to it, I was a rice person. But now that I'm back in Canada, I've kind of become a potato girl again. I'm just cubing these so that they boil quicker and I can mash them more easily. Again, in culinary school, this is not the recommended way to boil your potatoes, but that's okay. I'm gonna throw them into that pot right now. Next, I'm going to chop up my onion. You just need one little regular yellow onion for this. This is an extremely budget-friendly dish, I believe. Okay, I'm gonna put my onion in this little bowl here. While we're waiting for the potatoes to come to a boil, we are going to start frying this onion in butter. And then at some point, we're gonna add this corned beef. It says to open the can and crumble it in. But what I recommend doing is we're gonna pre-crumble this on our placemat here so that when it's ready to go in, it can just go in. Yay. Okay, let me pause this and then I'll show you when it's crumbled. Okay, I got it out. Let's have some fun and crumble it. All right, now we are ready to start frying our onions. I'm gonna move the camera over by the stove and we will get started. Okay, I've got my onions cooking in my pan. My corned beef is at the ready. I just wanna brown these a little bit. I think it will be tasty. Okay, I'm gonna add my corned beef now. And it says to fry for a minute or two. So not too long. Okay, I'm gonna pull this off the stove and I'll meet you back at the island and we'll start piecing this hash together. Okay, so the next step is to mix the ketchup and baked beans together, and then we are going to mix it in with the corned beef and onion and then put it in this dish and the mashed potato layers going on top. So I think I can actually mix everything in this dish and kind of save myself an extra dirty dish. So here goes 1 tin of Heinz baked beans, original. Let's shake this up. 2 TB ketchup, 1, 2. Splash of Worcestershire sauce. And let's mix this up, and then we will mix in the corned beef and onions. This recipe has the option of putting grated cheese on top of the mashed potatoes, but I have opted not to do that because I have 2 people in my family who are not huge fans of cheese. So we're doing it cheeseless. I am also going to add a little bit of pepper to this part because I think it will be nice. It smells really beefy. I'm like not a huge fan of the smell of corned beef, but I'm pretty sure I like the taste. So this is what it looks like when you spread out the base. It does kind of resemble dog food. I have boiled and strained my potatoes. Now I'm going to add some butter. Maybe about a tablespoon and a quarter. I'm gonna add some salt. Oh yeah. And some pepper. And I'm gonna mash them up. If school lunches were like cooked in North America, I actually wouldn't mind being a school dinner lady. Okay, these have been mashed. Now I'm gonna put them on top. Now this is not in the recipe, but because at this point it is optional to add cheese, and I am not adding cheese, I am gonna put a few knobs of butter on top. Lastly, we're gonna bake this at 350 for about 30 minutes or until the top is a bit brown and crispy. So in the meantime, let's get back to our Bakewell tart. Okay, so I've got my tart shell ready here and my oven has already previously been preheated to 400 degrees. I actually have mine at 425 because it's a gas oven, so it tends to run a little bit lower. But what we're gonna do next is we're gonna blind bake this crust for 15 minutes. So what you're gonna need is some parchment paper, some rice or beans, and your shell. I also have my little mini guy here. He's also gonna be thrown in for the 15 minutes. Crumpling this just makes it easier to fit into the pie shell. I'm using rice because I forgot my baking beans at home. Just enough to weigh it down. We are gonna bake this now for 15 minutes, like I said before. After 15 minutes, we're gonna take the whole thing with rice out of this and bake it for another additional 5 minutes. Let's do it. In the meantime, while we're waiting for those to bake, I think it's fine to start making our filling. There's no wheat flour in this filling, so it should be fine to sit while we wait for the crust to cool a little bit. So I have 150 grams of caster sugar, which is just extra fine sugar, and 150 grams of butter, which is kind of room temperature. So we're gonna be creaming it. So first we are going to cream this butter and sugar together. Whee! There is the same amount of butter in this filling as there is in the crust, so that should be delicious. I chose a too small bowl. Let me transfer this. This green one should be perfect. Let me show you what this looks like. There it is. Your butter and sugar should look a little bit lighter than before when it's creamed. So now we need to add 1 egg, 150 grams of almond flour, and 1 teaspoon of almond extract, which I'm going to eyeball. I love, love, love the smell and taste of almond extract. It doesn't taste or smell like almonds at all, I don't think, but it's delicious. Let's mix this together. Okay, let me show you what this looks like. This is what your finished filling should look like. And then we are all ready to wait for our pie crust. After the 15-minute timer, we will turn down the temperature of the oven to 350, take out the blind beans or rice, and bake an additional 5 minutes. Then we're gonna let the crust cool slightly, and we'll be back with jam and filling. So next, it's raspberry jam time. They recommend 3 to 4 tablespoons, but like I said at the beginning of this video, I want it to be a little bit jammy. Let's go on the wild side. A little bit, like 5 tablespoons. You can see the crust, I'll show you this. It's so layered, all those bits of butter. It was really worth working into little peas. Raspberry jam layer accomplished. Time to clean the spoon. Next, let's put our almond filling into our tart shell. Ooh. Wow, looks like a lot of filling. Come on. Lean you there. Oh, it smells great. I am really tempted to just eat this filling. This is really sticky. It's thick. It's kind of difficult to spread out actually. You know what? When in doubt, use your hands. They are still one of the best tools in the kitchen. This is probably why they don't put too much jam on these, because it's kind of hard to spread this over top of the juicy, juicy jam. Okay, let me show you a close-up of what my pie looks like, and then we are gonna put this in the oven at 350 for around 30 minutes. This is what my pie, or my tart looks like right now. You can see the flakes in that pastry are gonna be so good. And I really did try my best to pull the almond to the edges, but I chose jam over aesthetics, so there you go. Okay, the corned beef hash is out. It's got those little brown bits, it's bubbling. It looks really lovely. The tart is out of the oven and it has cooled. So what I'm gonna do is take it out of the shell and then we're going to ice it. A tip for taking your tarts out of their shells is to place it on top of a can and then the edges come away. And I'm gonna place this onto the cooling tray still, and then on top of a placemat to catch any icing that may fall down. For the icing, you're gonna need 300 grams of icing sugar, a teaspoon of almond extract, and just enough water to kind of make it loose but thick. We don't want it actually to drip down the sides of the tart. We do want it to kind of stay on top, so that's what we're aiming for. As well as that, if you wish to do this signature little design on top, you're gonna need some food coloring. I've got No Taste Red and a toothpick, a separate little bowl for mixing the color, and then how I'm gonna get the line on top is I'm gonna put that colored icing in a little Ziploc bag, snip the corner, and then pipe it like that. If you don't have piping bags, this is a really easy and cheap way to make one. One teaspoon of almond extract. Let's start with 2 tablespoons of water. That is way not enough water. Let's do 4 more. is looking thick. Ooh, this whisk is a little skinny. That looks pretty good, I think. It's thin, but not too thin. Okay, next. I'm gonna take a little bit in this bowl. That should be enough. Then what I'm gonna do is put this on the tart. And spread it with my spoon. I didn't put all of it on right away because, like I said at the beginning of the video, I personally don't like it when the icing appears to make up a third of the tart. Wow, it looks really pretty and glossy. A little bit more over here. Okay, I still have some left in here. So you know what, actually I didn't even really need this separate bowl. It's kind of a waste of a dish, but that's fine. I've got lots of dishes to wash up anyways. Ooh, it's new. Okay, I'm gonna dip the back end of this toothpick in here. Woo, and then swirl that in the icing. Wipe that off. It's the pointy end I'm going to use to make the design. Okay, I've got my pink colored frosting here. Let's put it in the Ziploc. I definitely won't be using all of this. So actually, I think for my personal preferences, 250 grams of icing sugar may have been enough. Okay, that's zipped up. I'm gonna make a tiny little hole at the tip. Always test it out. That looks good. Okay. You're just gonna make perfectly straight lines across the pie. And then what you're gonna do is get the pointy end of your toothpick and pull through, pull through, pull through. Okay, you know what? I could have done one more here. This is the finished Bakewell Tart. You can see how you pull through. I should have actually colored my pink icing first because the white frosting started to dry out a bit when I was pulling through. So all that's left to do now is to taste it. And I don't have any reference for what a corned beef hash should taste like, so I will just give you my honest, blind opinion. That is delicious. This looks like dog food slop, but the combination of flavors is almost like scientifically calculated to be delicious. It's salty, buttery, it's got onions, it's got ketchup, it's got Worcestershire sauce. Like, the texture is still like dog food, but this is pretty good. I can definitely see kids loving this. Yeah, I would not have been depressed at all if I had that for school lunch. This is great. Now it's time for dessert. I don't know if my icing is totally set, but I really want to do the tasting now. Oh, my icing is goopy still. I'm gonna cut a tiny little sliver. Oh, that crispy crust. Whoa. Oh, oh, oh. There we go. Oh, crumb. Okay, my icing hasn't quite solidified yet, but if I scrape it away, you can see the layer of the flaky pastry, the jam, the almond, and then the icing. I'm really excited about this. Now that is almondy. That's like the almond punch that I always wanted to get from the imported Bakewell tarts. Wow. It is really sweet though. And one thing that surprised me about this recipe is that there's not salt at all in it. No salt in the pastry, the filling, or the icing on top, which is a little bit strange to me. So it is quite sweet. But again, since this is supposed to be for a retro British school dinner, there's no such thing as too sweet for kids. All right, that's it for this week's episode of Vintage Recipe Hero. I hope you enjoyed making this retro British school dinner with me. Again, if you are interested in seeing more retro British school dinner recipes, please check out the shorts, which I have linked down below. And stay tuned to see my British mother and British uncle's opinions on if these retro recipes are actually authentic to what they were served for school dinners during their school days. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.